Hi everyone, welcome to YMP TV again. We're now on episode 10 and today we're lucky we have George Salamis, the CEO of Integra Resources. Hi George, nice to see you.
Bianca, good morning. Great to see you, and I guess good morning to all the young mining professionals out there who are listening. You might not know it, but all the young mining professionals are about to have the ride of their life. Sadly, the COVID pandemic is really a horrible experience for many, but the mining resource industry is going to be so good to the young mining executives. Maybe they have no idea.
Great, then that's positive. We're happy to hear that. So today we're doing the formula a bit differently. Instead of like me asking you a question about Integra Resources or COVID-19, we're going to talk about an article that you wrote last year called The Art of Junior Mining M&A, a lesson learned from M&A in junior mining. So can you tell us why you decided to write that article?
Yeah, so it came actually, it was 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago that I wrote that article, and it came on the back of being at the Bank of Montreal Mining and Metals Conference, which takes place every year in Florida. And those who have attended will know that this is kind of like the Mount Everest of mining conferences. It's the best place for any mining company to present what they have to prospective investors. And so anyway, over the course of that conference 2 years ago, I met a lot of young mining executives who were attending for the first time. Now, I've been going for 20 years, but it was their first experience. And so some very, very sharp, bright young mining professionals were there, and they had some great projects that were getting a lot of attention. They were basking in the glow of being there, which was really cool to see. And then I thought to myself, wow, 20 years ago, what would I have needed coming into a conference like this? Because there really is no recipe book, there's no playbook out there for how to set up your company to be in the spotlight, maybe to attract M&A. So I said to myself, okay, what would everybody here need who's here for a first time? And basically, so what I concluded was I've got to write this playbook. I've got to write something that the young mining professional can take as a recipe book based on lessons that I've learned over 30 years, essentially, billions of dollars worth of M&A transactions that I've been involved with personally, and boil it down. And how can I do that? So right at the end of the conference was over in Florida, spectacular place. Sat by the pool, ordered a couple of margaritas, and all I did was write like reams of paper. Which then turned into this piece, the white paper on junior mining M&A and lessons learned. And I tried to draw as many parallels as possible to Sun Tzu and his art, The Art of War, which has become a pretty well-established book that many people, both in business and in military, study, because there's a lot of parallels between what Sun Tzu said about preparing for war and then fighting that war, and the way we should be preparing our companies in the junior mining space.
I read the article and there was a note that I found very interesting, and I wanted to hear like what came to your mind at that time. You said, paying dues never end. It simply changes form or shape. Can you explain the meaning to it for young professionals?
Yeah. First off, I mean, we're always paying dues to somebody, right? There's always some higher power that we're answering to, and I think a lot of certainly, and that was me as well. A lot of young mining executives sort of go into it and say, okay, well, I've reached the C-suite now. I've reached the summit of my career in junior mining. I don't have to answer to anybody. I've paid my dues. I don't have to answer it to anybody. Well, that's actually not true. You have to keep answering to people. You still have to pay those dues. It just changes form. And in the C-suite, literally the people you're paying dues to, the people that you're answering to are your shareholders, your stakeholders, your financiers, your board of directors, all in that sort of same level of importance. And so that doesn't end. And I think where young mining professionals fall afoul is when they get to that level and they say, okay, I don't have to I don't have to pay attention to any of these important groups anymore. I know exactly what's right for my company, and I'm going to do what I please. And that's where, you know, many a young mining CEO or CFO has fallen afoul, because it creates this great disconnect between themselves, the company, and those who own them as a company. And you usually see the net result is usually a, you know, vastly decreased valuation over time because of that disconnect. So yeah, we're always paying dues.
And then you touched a bit upon it, but I'm going to rephrase it in the form of a question. So your article is about drawing parallels that you draw between M&A strategies in the resource sectors and the to-do list that is about preparing and waging a war that is found in the book called The Art of War. Can you a bit elaborate on this and tell us like how you came to draw these parallels?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned in the article that there are really many parallels between what was mentioned by Sun Tzu in terms of preparing for war and actually waging that war, and the way junior mining companies should prepare themselves to maybe engage in the M&A process. And you know, if you have a look at that white paper, you know, I think I go through 24 of them, but you know, the ones that come to mind are, you know, top of the list, have a plan A and a plan B. That's so critical. You know, armies fight with multiple sets of plans. If plan A goes wrong, we're going to adopt plan B as a fallback or as an alternate route if plan A doesn't work. I've seen so many companies, junior mining companies specifically, have one plan that they stick to, and then, you know, bad stuff happens, and then they don't have a plan B to fall back to, and that's, you know, there's a lot of value destruction that happens in that case when you don't have the plan B. The philosophy of momentum in war is super critical. Always keep moving forward. You will lose the initiative if you lose the momentum in battle. It's the same thing in junior mining. You cannot afford to just stand still. You have to keep your company moving forward in the headlines with news. And I'm not talking about news that necessarily costs a lot of money to create, but you just have to kind of keep that going. One of the things that we learned in Integra Gold, and you interviewed André Saint-Germain, and you interviewed Steve as well, and we were all Integra Gold alumni, I guess. One of the things we learned was it's a really big fallacy in our junior mining sector of going about the business of building up a resource asset and then saying, here it is, this is it, putting a nice bow around it. Now I'm going to sort of step back and wait for somebody to buy it, wait for somebody to take us over. And you know, you can be waiting an awful long time for that to happen. So what we did in Integra Gold, and we're doing it again in Integra Resources, is we're building up a big resource base, but we're actually putting a credible plan that we could perhaps build this. We can finance this. We can build this ourselves. We don't need to sit there and wait for somebody to buy us. And we did that as I said, Integra Gold, and we're going to do it with Integra Resources. We're doing it now. Being in the news is critical. Just kind of, again, keeping that news flow surrounding your story is critical. And I think last but not least, if I was to think about things, you know, leaders of armies often have egos, and it you know, you need some ego to drive an army forward. Too much ego has destroyed many armies in the past and many battle plans. And I've seen that in the junior mining space as well. Again, a little bit of ego is great. Too much ego is a destroyer of value. So staying humble, always asking yourself the question, am I doing the right thing? Am I satisfying my stakeholders, my shareholders, my board? That's really key. And don't let your ego get the best of you. I think that's a big thing.
There's another point you mentioned in your article. You say when the M&A appetite of major mining companies switches on, it switches on very fast.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think we'll see the M&A appetite post-COVID-19 switching on?
Yeah. Oh, I think, boy, do I ever. in fact, looking at my 30 years of being in this business, I've never seen a better case for gold or mining resources, but specifically gold. That's the business. That I'm in. And I think in order to answer that question, you need to go back in time and look at other financial crisis points. And 2008 being the last one, 2001, 2002 with the dot-com crash, the same, 1987, another one. And gold fulfilled a role in those times of crisis where, it was sold alongside everything else. Everybody was looking for liquidity, and so if I'm looking for liquidity, I'm going to sell everything that's liquid, and gold is kind of at the top of the list. That happens right at the beginning, and then you see gold start to climb its way out of the hole, so to speak, and that takes months. And then right behind that come the gold equities, that sometimes, in the case of the '08 crash, took years. 2008 it happened, and it wasn't until 2010, 2011 that the gold equities started to kind of keep up pace with rising gold. Now, by comparison, what has happened in this COVID-related crash has been the amount of stimulus that's gone in this time around is far bigger. The speed at which it's going in is far bigger. The recoveries that we're seeing in certain sectors of the market is far faster. And so what you've seen from that is gold's climb out has been far quicker. The gold equity climb out has been far quicker. And I think M&A's climb out is also going to be far quicker. Like the time compression that's happening everywhere else in this recovery is going to happen to M&A. And sort of my call is the second half of this year is going to be really good for mining M&A. I think it's going to start with the single asset producers, those that move the needle for the buyers, right? The mid-tier and majors that will buy them, and then there'll be nothing left. And then they're going to go to the junior deposit developers, and they're going to go to the ones like Integra Resources, for example, Western US, large resources, tier 1 jurisdiction. Those will get taken over, and then the tier 2 jurisdiction assets will get taken over, and then the tier 3 jurisdiction assets will get taken over. But again, that's going to happen far faster than any other period in generations. That's my view.
Interesting. And then you also said something else, and I'll quote you on this one. Said, investor needs things to get excited about. How juniors miners can provide this, anything that would excite investor during and post crisis?
Yeah, again, keeping in front of your story with a constant news supply is key, right? Keeping your company in the headlines. And again, you really don't need to have a massive treasury to do that. I mean, it can be anything from prospecting to just basic mapping and sampling on the ground, things that aren't expensive for your junior exploration company. It could be geophysics, which is typically not an expensive line item in your budget. And marching your project towards a goal. We're going to get the project to a PEA stage, which in the grand scheme is not an expensive ordeal. Those sorts of things keep the company rolling. And I should say another important point, and you mentioned, so what can we do in this COVID era that we're in now? Because it's a special set of outstanding circumstances. I know that the exploration function lends itself very well to social distancing, right? It's a function that we can carry on without being close to one another. In fact, there are many people who go into exploration so that they're not close to one another, right? They like to socially distance themselves because that's who they are. The drilling function, drilling a project, you can keep all the preventative measures for pandemic spread in place and still carry out your normal course of work. So yeah, all that to say is that life doesn't stop for the junior explorer because of preventative pandemic measures, we can easily carry on that function.
And George, before we end this interview, is there any messages you would like to pass on to young executive in the current context?
Yeah, it's a pretty loud message, and it actually I put this in that white paper on junior mining M&A. You know, we often forget in the course of what we're doing when we're in battle to sit back and step back and enjoy what's going on around you, because it really doesn't happen that often in any one person's mining career. So if I've got one message to say to young mining professionals right now, it's really enjoy the ride, because this is going to be a ride of your lifetimes. This is it right now. That storm that's coming is going to be such a wild ride for you, especially gold. It'll be the ride that we haven't seen for generations. It'll probably be the best ride of my 30-year plus career that's coming up right now. And so for those who are just getting started, just prepare yourself. Sit back, have fun. Don't let your egos get in the way of your inflated share price valuations. Don't go out and buy those Ferraris, even though you're tempted to do that. Just keep your eyes on the prize. You know, times like this don't come around often. When they do, you got to enjoy them.
Oh, that's great, George. That's very positive. And I'll share your white paper with our audience. Like, I'll provide a link so everyone can read it through and understand better what we're talking about. But thank you for doing this. I mean, we really appreciate that mining executives take the time to speak to young mining professionals. And as a result of that, we've decided YMP to provide donation to United Way Greater Toronto to provide for those in need of care during this COVID-19 crisis, i.e. students that may need help. So for those listeners and members, I'll provide a link again on our website. And George, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. We really appreciate.
Thanks, Bianca. Yeah, you be safe.
You be safe as well. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.